you read Doctrine and Covenants 119 and decided that the law of consecration doesn't apply to you, I have bad news. Hey guys, Saint Explainer here. On this channel I explain my religion, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Today I'm continuing my Gospel Basics series by discussing stewardship and consecration, two closely related topics, and while consecration is a big scary word that gets thrown around, I'm going to have to talk about stewardship first. You can find out both what stewardship is and what's expected of you in Jesus' parable of the talents. Jesus compares the kingdom of heaven to a wealthy man leaving on a long journey, who gives his money to 3 of his servants. To the first he gives 5 talents, to the second 2, and to the last 1. Upon his return, he finds that the servant with the 5 talents had used his money wisely and earned himself 5 more talents, which he returns to his master. And the master rewards this servant, saying that because he had been faithful with a few things, he shall now be made ruler of many things. When the man with 2 talents returns, he also has doubled his money, and again the master is pleased with him and gives him the same reward. But when the man to whom had been given 1 talent returns, he had, in fear, buried his money instead of used it. The master is displeased with him and takes what he had and gives it to the first guy. 2 big lessons here. The first, your stuff, whatever you have, is actually God's stuff that he has given to you to be steward of for a time. And second, that he expects you to do good with what he's given you. Regardless of how much you had or didn't have to begin with, what matters is that you do good with it. The man with 5 and the man with 2 received the same reward, but the man who hid his money received nothing. So far so good, right? But if you're confused as to what God actually wants from this whole deal, then, well, that's where consecration comes in. Now, it is true that we currently do not live under the formal law of consecration. This, in the early days of the Restoration, was a covenant between church leaders to hold all their property in common and use that property to advance the cause of the church. And the Lord withdrew it because even they weren't keeping their commitments, much less the lay members. And in some sense, it was replaced by tithing. But as a general rule, I try not to act like something in the scriptures doesn't apply to me. So despite the absence of the formal law, I'd be looking for what consecration means to me. And also, if you've been through the temple, you're still under covenant to consecrate, to the building up of the kingdom of God on the earth and the establishment of Zion. And this is where we find out what we're supposed to do with all this stuff of God's that he has given to us. Now, what Zion means exactly, I'm going to get into in more detail in a future video. But for our purposes today, you can think of it as a good place, a place where God is king. There's a comparison to be made with the 3 kingdoms of glory. We could say that the celestial kingdom is heaven, and that the telestial kingdom is the world in which we now live. If you know, you know. But what about this one in the middle? Well, you can think of it as exactly that, the middle. Consecration is working towards the establishment of a heavenly society on earth. And you do this by using everything that God has given you to find Satan things around you and get rid of them and replace them with Jesus things. So while it's technically true that what's required is 1/10 of your income, to think that God only cares about that 1/10 and you're free to do whatever you want with the rest of it is just wrong. This money is also God's money and he cares what you do with it. And the same with your time, your talents, your property, your family, anything else that God has chosen to make you a steward of. So let's talk about one last thing. What happens to all that when you die? Well, I think it's pretty clear that the person who's receiving your stuff ought to be a good steward of it themselves. I think everyone understands this when you're talking about a dog. You wouldn't give it to Cruella de Vil, obviously. And the same thing applies to your money or your property or whatever else. And if you think, well, a house can't suffer the way that a dog can, so this is silly, maybe, but a community absolutely can. Ideally, that which God has given you ought to be passed down to your family and righteous descendants so they can continue your consecrated work. Remember, we're establishing a heaven on earth here. In heaven, families are eternal, they last forever. And therefore in Zion, earthly families would work the same way, passing down a stewardship and consecrated work through generations to establish the kingdom of God on the earth. Anyway, that's what I've got for today. Please be a good steward of the next 5 seconds by clicking the subscribe button, and I will see you next week.